It may be the offseason for Indiana football, but there are tons of great updates for the program.
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. I'm your man, Jacob Goins. I appreciate you being here, making this your first listen or your first watch every single day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are here. The Super Bowl is upon us, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet $5 and you will win. You'll score $200 in bonus bets. If you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Well, thank you so much for being here. Shout out to all of my everydayers who make this your first listen or your first watch every single day. More fallout from the Indiana basketball loss against Maryland. We'll continue talking why that was such a big deal. And the fact that you are picking up overseas recruits is still pretty impressive. We'll talk about a 6'6" sniper that committed to Indiana late last week, but huge updates for Indiana football today. I've got several of them in terms from junior day. You had Curt Cignetti visit the basketball game yesterday. We have the spring game update, and we keep a big time coordinator. So all of that right here on Locked On Hoosiers. Start with junior day that happened over the weekend. You had over 20 different kids who were coming in on campus, mostly Saturday, some trickled in on Sunday as well. And my goodness, the positive reviews that I've seen, heard, been told, it's truly incredible what happened here over the weekend as Indiana brought in several standouts from Indiana. You had Illinois, you had Ohio, a lot of surrounding states were here represented at Indiana's junior day. For those of you that may not be fully up to date on what a junior day is, you bring in your highest level recruits that you are interested in that you could possibly get on campus that are currently juniors in that upcoming class. And you bring them in on one big day, you celebrate, you see the facilities, you talk to the coaches, you try to plan it around other things happening on campus. And so Indiana and Curt Cignetti, the football team, brought them in this past weekend. And again, around 20, a little bit over 20 kids were on campus. And you can find different things and see what some of these kids had to say, but just raving reviews about the coaching staff, about the facilities, about the atmosphere, about the nutrition and the health of this program. I mean, you heard Brian Smith, our recruiting expert, talk about it on Friday. He's an IU grad, and he's talked about how Indiana has invested money and time and effort into this football program. And it's something that you and I talked about when Curt Cignetti was hired here. It's something he demanded, something he said, this has to happen. And I think it's starting to take effect. I think you're really starting to feel that within the recruits that come here, visit here. They can't wait to get back here, and they can truly see what's being built here. So I think it was a very successful junior day, one that you don't typically get a whole lot of commitments out of, especially nowadays. Right, with everything, with all the changes and just NIL and social media. I mean, it's tough to get early commitments now. And even if you do get one, the chances of it sticking and staying until National Signing Day, they're pretty rare. So don't stress that just yet. I think Indiana's going to be just fine. But I heard nothing but great things out of Indiana's junior day this past weekend. From all of that, at the basketball game, right, Curt Cignetti and the guys made an appearance once again. Funny enough, same game that they made the appearance last year against Maryland, where the famous quote came out of, yes, Ohio State sucks, Michigan sucks, and so does Purdue, right? That big quote that really got people sparked and fired up, one of the many that got people fired up. Didn't have what is, I guess, is trendy this past weekend, but one that I still think needs to be discussed. One that a presence that he and this program have. He says, quote, "We are full throttle in the 2025 season. We were not satisfied. We were not satisfied with what happened this past year for 2024. Not satisfied with the most wins in program history, not satisfied with making the first round of the college football playoff, not satisfied with your only 2 losses of the year being to the runner-up in the national championship game and the eventual national champion Ohio State Buckeyes. Not satisfied with that is Curt Cignetti and this staff. How does that feel, Indiana fan? Doesn't that feel good? Doesn't that feel just awesome knowing that your head coach, your program is to the level already, at least in their head, that we're not satisfied with how last year went. We're not okay. We're not going to settle. We're not just going to sit back and kick our feet up and celebrate that until the end of time. That's not the Curt Cignetti way. And he got a huge ovation at the game, rightfully so, right? He's the only big coach winning right now. And he told you to your face, anybody that would listen, we're going back to work. We plan on being back and being better for this upcoming season. And I think you could see that with the players you bring back. I think you could see that with the transfer portal class, even with the recruiting class as well. And something that really gets me excited about all of that is the fact that you kept another big-time coordinator. We know about Shanahan on the offensive side. You've got him as your OC still and your wide receivers coach. But over the weekend, big news for Indiana football as Bryant Haines, our defensive coordinator, one of the best DCs in all of college football, is staying right here in Bloomington. Indiana gives him an extension. He gets a buyout, right? That's all changed. He is staying in Bloomington for an extended amount of time. And if you don't realize how big of a deal this is, let me just throw some of these numbers at you. In terms of what Indiana did pass defense, they were 10th overall this season. In terms of rush defense, they were the number 1 team this past season. And in total defense, they were ranked number 2 this past season in all of college football. Not in the state of Indiana, not in the Big Ten, not on the East Coast. In the country of college football, Indiana was the 2nd ranked overall defense in 2024. And you go and get, or I say it that way, it's how it feels, but you secure Bryant Haines, who is your DC. He's not going anywhere. And he very easily could have been poached by 2 big programs in this conference. Did you notice how Ohio State's defensive coordinator just went to Penn State, got a pay raise to go there? Yeah, that's a big deal. It also means that Ohio State had an opening for their DC job. And Indiana said, nope, look somewhere else. We're keeping our boy right here in Bloomington. So that's a big deal. Bryant Haines, I cannot stress to you enough how big of a deal that is. From his on-field coaching, his game planning, his recruiting, all of that matters. And Bryant Haines staying for this Indiana team is big, big stuff. Other thing we learned this weekend is when the spring game will be. We've got a date for the spring game for Indiana football. It's going to be on Saturday, April 19th. That'll be at noon Eastern time. Again, Saturday, April 19th there at Memorial Stadium. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to see what this team looks like in terms of the new guys, of recruiting and transfer portal, a lot of your returnees, right? I don't look a ton into spring games. I look more in terms of who plays where, what different formations do we see, where do they put new players? I mean, that's more of what it is. It's hard to buy into those nowadays, but we do have a date on that. And it's Saturday, April 19th for the 2025 Indiana football spring game. Oh, told you we had a lot of updates, right? That's great stuff in terms of Indiana football. But now we flip over to basketball. Before we talk about the Maryland loss and the fallout that is inevitable from that, Indiana's still picking up recruits and commits for the future of this program. Somehow, some way, but a 6'6" sniper from overseas has committed to the Hoosiers. We'll talk about that coming up next right here on Locked On Hoosiers. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now, Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who could do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy, all so you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Welcome back into Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on all things Indiana athletics. If you are a returnee, one of my everydayers, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on the audio platforms of Spotify and Apple and Amazon, thank you so much for being here. Really does mean a ton as we are winding down here the month of January and launching ourselves into February, but another great month. So thank you so much for being here. You know what to do. Like the video on YouTube, leave your comments down below on all the updates in terms of Indiana football, and then be sure that you are subscribed if you haven't already. And same goes to you if you're brand new here. This is your first day listening or watching. Help me out and do those things for me by liking, subscribing, leaving your comments, following us, turn on those notifications. However you can be a part of this community, I want you to be so, because we're having a lot of fun talking really good stuff on Indiana athletics, football, basketball, you name it. We got it right here with Locked On Hoosiers. Well, before we talk about Indiana basketball's debacle against Maryland a little bit more, somehow, some way, doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, not questioning, well, yeah, kind of questioning why this happened, but excited that this happened. A guy that we've talked about in the past, a 6'6" three-point artist, a three-point sniper, three-point guy, whatever you want to say, whatever word you want to put in there. The 6'6", some list him as 6'7", Bosnian wing Haran Zrno has committed to Indiana. Now, he's somebody we mentioned was going to be visiting. If you remember, him and his sister and his agent actually came during the USC game. So not a bad time to be here. And they absolutely loved it. They loved their time here. They loved the coaching staff. They loved the program, the fan base, just the name, the weight that it carries, right? That our name, our logo has. They loved that. And he committed on Friday. The news came out Friday morning that Haran Zrno, the 6'6" wing, 6'6", 6'7", depending on where you look, he is committed to be at Indiana starting next year. Actually, he will be a student come June, but he's a 21-year-old freshman. Let me say that again. He is a freshman. He will be a freshman in college, but he's 21 years old. That's because he's been playing in the Bosnian circuit. He's been playing professional basketball for Bosnia. And he also has a chance to play on the Bosnian national team coming up next summer, or I guess this summer, which would be pretty crazy to think about, that Indiana could have a freshman who is 21 playing on a national team somewhere else. And this is a good thing for several reasons. One, he loved Brian Walsh. That's the guy that recruited him. That's the guy that he fell in love with. That's the one that they really, really liked, was Brian Walsh. So for those of you that may be asking, and myself included, well, why would anybody commit here with the downfall that we're in and the possibility of the head coach not being here next year? Well, it's because he fell in love with an assistant coach and really, really liked what he has to offer. And the hope is that that guy would remain if Mike Woodson doesn't survive. Again, we're not cheering for the downfall of Indiana. We want Woody to be successful, but you got to ask the question. It's like, are you watching what's happening here? But that clears it up, does it not? That he actually really fell in love with Brian Walsh. I'm sure his relationship with Mike Woodson is just fine, but Brian Walsh was the main one that recruited him. So it makes a little bit more sense. But for Indiana, in terms of next year and the future, right? You bring in this guy, you bring in Zrno, who is a really, really good player. I compare the way he plays. I'm not saying he's this player yet. I'm just comparing the way he plays to what KD does, Kevin Durant, who he can shoot off the bounce, he can shoot off the pass, he can create his own shot, he can get to the lane, he can pass it out, he can get others involved. He's just really skilled with the basketball in his hands, more than you would think from a 6'7" dude. But that's kind of what I compare him as, is a lengthy, just big forward, really, that can handle the basketball and shoot like a guard. That's what I compare him to. Not to that extent by any means, but just that kind of body style and that play style is what Zrno brings to Indiana. So you bring him in along with Trent Sisley, who is in contention to be a McDonald's All-American. So that's not bad, right? You at least pick up somebody else to come in next year for this Indiana team. You'll most likely have to hit the transfer portal again, which is fine, but you're bringing in two guys who are really, really good. You're very young freshman in Trent Sisley and an experienced freshman, which is difficult to say, in Zrno, who's been playing pretty legitimate basketball. I've told you before, I don't stay up late and watch Bosnian basketball, but listen to some of the stats that this guy's going after right now. I mean, he is right now, the stats that are available to us, averaging 20 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, and he shoots 48% from downtown. Let me say that again. He shoots 48% from downtown, averaging 20 points, 4 boards, and 4 assists per game playing overseas. That's pretty good. I don't care what league you're in. I don't care if it's in the church league. You're averaging those types of numbers. You're a certain type of dude. You're a certain type of player. So Indiana brings that in next year with Trent Sisley. Another big reason that I think this is very important is Indiana is now getting involved in this new ever-growing trend in basketball to go overseas. Man, look at the NBA. Look, which, again, shout out Khalil Ware, who is all of a sudden in the Rookie of the Year running and in the lead for Rookie of the Year because he keeps dominating and doing his thing. Anyway, look at what the NBA is doing. Look at the best players in the league right now, right? When they're all healthy, it's Giannis, it's Joel Embiid, it's Nikola Jokic, right? It is those big-time players who are all from overseas. They're all not Americans. They're playing in several other countries and coming to the United States to play basketball. You're seeing that in the college game as well. And Indiana is now involved in that circuit. Indiana is now in that timeline, I guess, or whatever you want to call it. They're now involved and they're in the wave. And you hope that this can continue, right? If Zrno can come over here and be successful, then there could be a pipeline overseas to Bloomington, which is a big deal, man. That's the future. I'm telling you, it's the future of basketball with how good those guys are, how advanced they are, and just how different their game is. And it's really widening our perspective and making the college game better and the professional game better as well. So Indiana's now got their foot in the door in that aspect. And you do that with a 6'7" sniper. And he's just a shot creator, shot maker. I think he's somebody Indiana could really, really use next year, no matter who the head coach is, because now you bring him in with Trent Sisley, plus whoever else you decide to bring in through the transfer portal. So a big time pickup for Indiana. As again, I've seen 6'6", I've seen 6'7", I've seen 6'8". So we may as well just meet in the middle and say he's 6'7". The kid is massive. He's just a huge kid. And again, he's going to be 21 when he gets here. So he's got that experience. He's a little bit older, hopefully a little bit mature, right, as well. And he can step in and be a young class, but an older leader on this team. It's going to be weird trying to get used to that, but really excited about Haran Zrno, the 6'7" three-point shooter from Bosnia, has committed to play for Indiana basketball. Well, speaking of Indiana basketball, more fallout from their loss to Maryland yesterday. We'll continue to break down just the, disaster, embarrassment. Seems like we use those words quite a bit for Indiana, don't we? Well, we'll keep talking about it and the fallout that ensues as Indiana falls to Maryland. That's coming up right here in the final segment on Locked on Hoosiers. Today's episode of Locked on Hoosiers is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with the FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or betting on the coin toss. FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, it's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to fanduel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's fanduel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 59. Final segment right here on Locked On Hoosiers. Again, thank you so much for being here. Shout out to all my everydayers, or if you're new here, appreciate you being a part of today's show. More fallout from Indiana's loss against Maryland over the weekend on Sunday afternoon. It's just crazy. And I thought about it, right? I sat and I thought about it. We did a reaction show yesterday, an immediate reaction show. If you missed that, go check that out here on the Locked On Hoosiers YouTube channel or on your audio platforms and podcasting. We had an immediate reaction, almost 20 minutes, because, man, I just kept going through different things of what stuff that stuck out to me. It's like, okay, Indiana did this pretty well. Man, then you backed it up with this really bad. Oh, you did this okay. And then you followed it up with this that was pretty terrible. And Maryland didn't play great either. That's what continues to stand out here is, and Maryland didn't do anything special other than, I don't know, go 50% from downtown. But I put that more on Indiana because we just give up wide open shots. We just let them shoot willy-nilly. And guess what? Shocker, they're playing college basketball. They can actually knock them down when they're open. What a crazy idea that is. Indiana can't say the same. And, man, you just know that things are not good in the locker room, in the program, when it is late January and you still have simple, basic communication issues. When you can't communicate on defense on who's switching on a high ball screen, that's a problem. When you have to be yelling and arguing at each other, walking to the huddle because there's a disagreement, that's a problem. When Mike Woodson just looks dazed and confused after certain plays and the team acts like they have no idea what they're doing, that is an issue. And the players speaking after the game yesterday and talking about how they were instructed to foul with the one to give on that last possession by Maryland when it was just a totally blown up play. Nobody knew what was going on. Maryland was trapped right there at the free throw line. Indiana had 3 dudes who could have said, I'll take this, and foul him. Instead, Indiana watched him. He passed it out, and Maryland did what they did all afternoon. It was fitting, really. It's a storybook ending. They knocked it down for 3. Indiana then comes down. We call timeout. And there was supposed to be some sort of a play design on that final inbound attempt for the Hoosiers. And instead, we toss it in the short corner. The suicide corner is what I always call it. And it ends up with a turnaround corner 3 at the buzzer that had no prayer of going in. And that's how Indiana loses. You could just turn on the final minute of that game. And that pretty much sums up where we are as a team, where we are as a program. And subbing out guys like Anthony Leal to the booing and displeasurement of the crowd, that should have told you something, Woody. That should have said, maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe I shouldn't sub out the guys like, I don't know, Umar Ballo, who is your best chance to score offensively. Maybe you shouldn't do that. But he did anyway. One of the most head-scratching things I've seen him do during his time. And you see the result, 79-78. You give up a horrible shot on the defensive end, and you take a horrible shot on the offensive end. And a game that you had won, that you were down and out of, you fought back better than we've seen all year. The crowd was with you. The momentum was with you. Everything was on your side. You had a chance to get a top 20 net win on your home floor, a quad 1 win. Would have been your 3rd one of the year. Instead, now you fall to 2-7 in quad 1 games, and you hit the toughest stretch of your season where 5 out of your next 6 games are against top 25 teams. That includes Purdue this Friday night on the road. I don't know where to go from here because Indiana continues to let the opposing team's best players play really well. And not just one, they allow 3, 4, or 5 of them to do so. And it just seems like there's no real identity. There's no game plan. There's no strategy. It's just, let's walk out on the floor and see what happens. Indiana almost got away with it yesterday. And instead they let Maryland escape. And I didn't think you could lose the fan base anymore if you were Mike Woodson. But somehow you did after yesterday with the best crowd that's been there all year. You embarrassed yourself again, and you let Maryland beat you. You now go to 14-7 overall. We now are 5-5 in Big Ten play. 5-5 in Big Ten play, and we're losers in 4 out of our last 5. There's a decent chance he doesn't survive this stretch. I'm just going to be real honest with you. I think there's a real good chance he doesn't survive this stretch. I'm not a fan of firing coaches midseason. I'm not. I don't think it gets you a whole lot, but you may have to if you're Indiana just to save any sort of credibility with the fans. I don't know, man. Just breaking this down more, going back and watching it, and especially those last couple of minutes, I just asked the question, and I'll leave it here. What are you doing, Mike Woodson? What are you doing, Woody? What are you thinking? What's your thought process? What's your game plan? What's your strategy here? And not just in that game, just in general. What's going on inside this Indiana basketball program? Because we're all completely baffled and confused, concerned, and most people have already closed the book on this chapter, and they're ready to move on. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers. If you miss any of our other shows, including our reaction show yesterday to Indiana falling to Maryland, be sure you check that out on the Locked On Hoosiers YouTube channel or on any of your podcasting sites on Spotify, Apple, Amazon. Have those notifications turned on. Subscribe to the show if you can on YouTube or your podcasting site, and have those notifications turned on so you never miss a new episode. We are back tomorrow, Hoosier fans. All right, so until then, stay safe. I'll talk to you later.